This year marks the 50th anniversary of the creation of the Steadicam, and Tiffen asked me to do an interview with Garrett Brown, the inventor of the Steadicam, last June at an event that they had entitled Tall Steadicam Tales. It's actually a video which is up on the website and is worth seeing because there's a lot of stuff cut into it. Garrett is a master storyteller with an incredible number of great stories that are often hysterical, and we felt that it would be a good addition to the podcast. So without any further delay, here is Mr. Garrett Brown.
Lock it up, nice and quiet, and let's roll. Rolling.
Victor 30 Echo, take 2.
Hey, Margaret. Hey, Mark.
And camera set. And action.
And I'm going to be completely honest with you that I'm really, really nervous right now. Not because I'm sitting across from Mr. Brown here, but because I don't want to mess this up.
Don't worry. You can't possibly mess this.
Speak up, old man. I'm going to introduce Garrett, who needs no introduction, and it's interesting to try to figure out how to introduce someone who needs no introduction. So I started thinking about some of the things that Garrett has done. He has been a professional musician, a radio personality / voiceover artist, a Volkswagen salesman, a DP, a commercial director, a producer, a copywriter, a sailor, an inventor with 127 patents. I think that's what you told me last time. Won a ton of awards that I'm not...
128.
128. Won a ton of awards that I'm not even going to go into. He is presently, as he told me, semi-retired because Ellen, his lovely wife, has threatened that after the zine, he's not going to do any more inventions, which I don't believe for a second, because Garrett, for some reason, is always going to look at everything and say, there's a better way to do that, and I know how. He has now turned his attention to writing his autobiography and telling the stories of his 50-plus years in Steadicam and everything else. He is an amazing man, a gentleman about town, and a really great person, and as my dad would say, a true mensch, Mr. Garrett Brown.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
We have 5 more of these to milk these.
Exactly. It's going to build each time. No, thank you. That's the whole evening. So when we knew we were going to do this, we thought, okay, well, what are we going to do? And Garrett said, well, let me tell some stories about different movies. And I thought, oh, you probably have some stories about different movies. And I emailed a bunch of friends and said, okay, we're going to what do we want to ask him? What are we going to ask him? And of course, everybody came around to this movie that some of you may have seen called The Shining. I think it was with Stanley Kubrick. Might have been over in England. Do you remember this at all?
No.
No, okay. We'll show a clip. And, you know, there's tons of stories about it. There's the low mode and the maze and the walking through the steps and the 50 times or 25 times you had to do it before he would do it. And I said to everybody, so what do we want to ask him that he hasn't talked about before? And we went back and forth and back and forth. And what I realized what was on everybody's list was simply, what was your drop time on that shot?
Well, it was...
We'll be back with Garrett in a couple of minutes.
Oh. You meant then. I thought you meant now.
No, then. Yeah, exactly. Garrett and I will be here all night. No, okay. But we talked about it, and we thought Garrett might have some stories. So you want to start with a story about one of your early movies, perhaps?
Susan Lewis' inspiration was to call this Tall Steadicam Tales.
Yes.
Can't imagine where she got the idea. But I had a great time today just watching the session that began this thing with Chris and Henry and everybody and Andy. Inspiring stuff. And inspiring for me, specifically at this milestone. And by the way, can everybody hear me all right? Do I need to project anymore? Okay. How many were here for that session this morning? Excellent, excellent. I love that, and I thought, you know, after all this time, let's tell stories. Let's just tell stories about stuff that happened. And it happened because of, first of all, how wonderful filmmaking was in the 70s. And, you know, a great many of you will neither have been there nor specifically remember that. But it was a marvelous time to be making movies. There was no green screen. There was no, everything was analog. Everything we shot. It might have been a model. It might have been sped up or slowed down. There might have been somebody's glass shot in the foreground. But we shot real stuff, and that was inspiring. And I thought to myself, the moments that really interest me now are the moments that they were sort of firsts, but they were the moment of inventing stuff like, how do you get off a crane? And I watched Henry, glibly describe popping onto this crane at Chapman, and I thought back to my first crane shot. There was no Steadicam platform available with the Titan.
We're talking about Bound for Glory?
We're talking Bound for Glory.
Yeah. Okay.
Haskell's great idea, the combination shot. Down comes the crane, I step off, etc. Right?
And as you told me, you showed up and everybody was excited. They were just like, yes, let's do this.
No, they were totally indifferent to this idea. They thought that this kid has a death wish. They were gathered around as if I was like some kind of newsreel Icarus, ready to fly down to earth. And the grip department weighed in on how shall we let somebody step off a crane in the middle of a shot? Well, it's a slow motion catapult if you don't hang on to it, And they thought we better build this kid a platform. And they built me a literally 1 foot extension. Picture this, those of you who have been on the Chapman and stepped on and off, 1 foot out in front, held up by 2 2x4s that were C-clamped to the platform. And that sucker visibly kind of deflected, right? And they put the A camera operator, God help me, his name has just flipped out of my head.
I know who it is too.
Behind me as a safety idea. And his idea of safety was he had one hand on my vest, right? In case something should happen. And the grips were instructed, of course, as the crane came down to grab a hold of it. And we hadn't yet thought of banging the ground with it and, booming down as you hit and so on. So there was
Take the job.
My last shot was in 1994. Oh, is this spam? Yeah. And the operator said to me, because I'm standing on this little platform and my leg, it was just impossibly shaking. And he's looking at my leg and he's looking at the shot. And he says to me, that's funny, you're shaking, but the shot is still. And what got me through that was they broke for lunch and he bought me a beer. I think he administered a beer. It was a prescription, And I got through it, and then the crew flowed away, to do the regular work. And I hung around Stockton for 2 days and went into the screening room, which was jury-rigged in an Elks Club in Stockton. And I was on fire to know anything at all about this shot because my monitor was so terrible. It was a 1-inch black and white with a magnifying glass on it, exceedingly dim and covered with dust because it was very dusty. So I literally could not see a thing. And I framed that shot by aiming like you aim a gun at Carradine's chest. At least had the wit to not aim at his head, because then the headroom would have been wrong. So nobody knew anything about this shot, and I accosted a guy standing there, and I said, "Are you the projectionist?" And he looked at me very coldly, and he said, "I'm the producer." So I shrank down to my actual height at the time, which was 3 feet 4 inches. And I went to the back of the room and I hunkered down for an hour of Haskell Wexler's incredible dailies, firelit, this and that, getting smaller by the moment. And then this one printed take came up. And the room fell silent. They'd been very uproarious about Haskell's shots and this one and that one and calling out to each other. And the room fell silent. And this shot came down and I walked through the camp. And they remained silent at the end. And that was the last shot on the reel. And the take-up reel started to spin and the feed reel flapped and so on. And they leaped to their feet, shouting Haskell's name, stamping on the floor, clapping, roaring, you know. And that, I tell you, my friends, that is a day you should have one of in your life, you know. After years of complete uncertainty, and Ellen and I spending all our dough on these various things, suddenly it was like a strike of lightning. And that crowd was joyous for Haskell and for the film and for themselves and for me, you know. And it was astonishing, you know.
Did you know what the shot was before you showed up?
I know. Haskell told me he had a combination shot in mind. He's a bold character, you know.
And when he told you you're going to do this, did you think you were going to be able to pull it
Well,
off?
I had a prototype. We teach something in workshops called the look. How many have heard of the look? This is good. This is inspiring. The look is, you have to be careful as a Steadicam operator because your native expression is with your tongue hanging out and, you know, trying to evil the shot left or right. And I teach people, don't do that because people watch the Steadicam operator. It's an auteur kind of stunt, you know. They're watching you, and it's not inspiring for them to see you. And if you make a mistake, it's not inspiring if you go, oh, crap. So I teach them to have something on their face called the look. The look is a look of supreme confidence. It's sort of like this. This is as close as I can come to the look now after 50 years. Hey, man. I love myself, first of all. I love this film. I love the director, and I love this shot. And this is going to be fantastic.
So did you come?
No, I did not yet have the look.
You didn't have the look.
No. But I had a prototype of the look, which was to try to look cool, at least. And I'm so ashamed of myself. I've been writing about this guy, and the operator knew immediately that I was faking bravado. You know, so I tried to look like nothing could frighten me. But no, that.
And how old were you at this time?
That time, that was 1974. I was 31 and a half or 32.
And that's the biggest movie you've ever been on by a long shot.
Yeah, then I retired because you only need one day like that in your life.
And I'm out.
So we made a list of stories. Are you down with this storytelling routine? I figure I haven't shot in a long time. Tell that guy, 20 years. And you know, I don't have much to teach you about operating at this stage.
I don't think anybody in this room believes that.
I could regale you.
You could regale
your
us.
ass.
You want me to lead you in with some of these? Because I have things that I wrote down that I don't understand, and I think you're going to be able to explain them to me.
Okay. May I name the movies we want to talk about,
Yeah.
and then you may.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought you might want to hear a great story from Rocky, from Marathon Man, from Indiana Jones on the Rope Bridge, yes? Yes. And one from The Shining at least. And if we have time, I'll tell you about the inception of the quick release, which no longer is being manufactured, by the way.
No.
And I haven't heard of any fatalities as a result. Have you?
They push it right under the mat.
You
They
don't
tell
hear
people
about it, okay.
anymore.
All right.
Another one ready to take over.
Is that good?
They'll have another one take over.
Under Rocky, I wrote down, don't sling any iron, in quotations,
Oh, yeah,
and
okay.
car batteries. So if you can tell us what that means.
Okay.
So
Rocky was
Rocky.
a tiny, tiny film. As a result of Stallone insisting on starring in it, the producers took away all the dough. The budget was way under $1 million. It was one of the very early movies in Philadelphia. And Rocky was distinguished by having one motor home. That's how little this film was. And it was a beat-up old Winnebago, and in the front is where we catered in the cold, and in the middle was where Sly sat in his perpetual gray sweats. And in the back was the one and only Honeywell bathroom, right? Which was notoriously packed up and odoriferous, right? And I walked in there, and I knew Stallone was the star, and I said to him, "Is it working?" indicating the bathroom. And he said a quintessentially Stallone thing to me. He said, "Well, you don't sling any iron in there, you'll be all right." And I said, "I love this guy. I love this guy." He was fabulous.
That was not the story that I was expecting. There's more toilet stuff coming up, actually.
Yeah, there is, actually. Philly was so naive that they were really eager to please. They had, for example, a cordon of 6 motorcycle cops with lights flaring that would lead our tiny armada of trucks and cars back and forth from the staging area to wherever we're working, right? So we're shooting the steps. And at the top were all the various vehicles, including my crappy little van and a grip truck, smaller than you can imagine, and et cetera, right? There were maybe 4 or 5 vehicles and 6 motorcycle cops. And their idea of a honey wagon, this was made up and invented in Philadelphia. It has not taken off, has not caught on exactly, but it was a flatbed truck with 6 porta potties chained to it. Right? So that was part of our cortege, right? So now we wrap the step shot, and that I was pretty traumatized by that because the shaft came up through the center post of that little prototype, and I or somebody had dented it slightly, and there was a little friction on the motor drive, and it was cold, really cold. And my camera would not run in the cold with the 2 crappy little CP16 batteries at the bottom, right? Totaling 18 volts. So you know my motto by now, which is never give up, blah, blah, blah. I sent somebody out for 2 car batteries, a 6-volt and a 12-volt car battery. And we wired up a jumper cable from those 2 batteries to my camera, and lo and behold, it ran. In fact, it ran very energetically. So. But that meant that somebody had to run up the steps beside me or behind me with 2 car batteries. And that turned out to be poor Ralph Boda, the NABIT DP of that show, who was equipped by nature with not the legs you need to keep up. And so, to my immortal displeasure, at the top of this, Boda could not keep up. And the jumper cable went taut between my camera and Ralph. And if you'll inspect that shot to this day, as I get up to the top of the steps, it does this and then settles down, right? I mean, that has tormented me for 40, 50 years, right? But I tell people in workshops, it's okay, you know? It's never perfect. And it's a hell of a great shot. And it did occur to me eventually, it's okay, you know, that's fine.
Yeah.
But what came next humiliates me to this day. All the trucks kind of took off one by one, frustrating the cops who don't know when to start, when to launch, when to light up the lights, right? And finally, there are only 2 vehicles left, my little van and the flatbed trailer. And so I indicated we're ready to go. The driver of the flatbed gunned the thing up. And so there is the cops, sirens blazing, my little van, and a flatbed full of porta potties racing through the streets of Philadelphia. And to this minute, I cannot imagine what did the citizenry think was wrong with the people in that van. You know?
Oh my God.
I'm sad to say that excrement is a
It's a 3-story.
thematic element in some of these stories.
It is.
Including the next one.
Yes, but before we go on to that, so if you had to sling iron, you went to use the porta potties on the back of the thing, that was acceptable in there, according to
the thing was packed up. That was all you had left. Okay. There were more porta potties there than there were crew.
Question that I have for you is, that shot that we just saw of Sly running like on the wharf or something,
Yeah.
on the harbor or something like that?
That was an early vehicle shot.
Well, I was going to ask you where you're on, because every time I see that shot, there's something about that shot that it has more speed to it, even though you're wide. And
He ran that
something about
fast.
it.
He ran that fast. He was really fast. And I was sitting in a van, soft mount, you know, with my little rig and my crappy little monitor. You know, this was still a prototype. the same prototype as Bound for Glory in Philly. And Stallone, it was something about it. It just took off, you know. And that I love that shot.
It's
to
a
this
great
day.
shot.
It's
Every
an
time I see it
incredible
to this
shot.
day, it's
We
unbelievable.
shot all over that town, running everywhere, you know. And one of my favorites was the second vehicle shot we ever did in the Italian market. Looking back at him, probably with a 35 mil, something like that. And there's something about one of those shots being absolutely stable. And you acquire this geometrical joy from the buildings, those wonderful buildings and the fruit stands going by. And Stallone was up to every one of these moments. And somehow out of the corner of his eye, he realized that somebody had tossed him an orange or an apple like this, and he caught it, you know, with this big grin on his face. And that was just a fabulous shot. Just for your information, those shots were appreciated in LA by the producers. Ellen, what were their names again? Chartoff Winkler,
Yep.
who had denied him all the dough, and they started rethinking that because of the stuff we shot in Philly. And they shut it down, re-upped this picture in LA. To their everlasting shame, they canned Ralph Boda and picked up a union DP. Ralph was a NABID. And that just is so sorrowful. He never even got screen credit for that wonderful Philly stuff. But then I started work again in LA with the prototype for the so-called Steadicam 35, with the first of the elaborate arms and the first green screen monitor and so on, you know. And my first shot in LA was in the cold room with Stallone punching on the meat, right? And it was a fabulous shot to do because these giant things have their own inertia and they're in motion, you know. And I am trying to slip in between them, and I came home from that shoot covered with beef tallow on all sides. But enough of that. What's up? Marathon Man, right?
Marathon Man, I have written down two things.
Wait, maybe let me see what they are first.
Oh, yeah, well, I only have one written down because the other one, that one, and no, the other one I never written down. I actually lied. I have it in my head.
Yeah, good.
It's my favorite thing. The three-arm sweater.
All right, don't say anymore.
And the other one.
And the other one. Oh, you can say giant dog poop.
Oh, I can say giant dog poop?
Okay.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, sorry. You want to start with giant dog poop?
No, let's start with three-arm sweater.
Okay, three-arm sweater.
We're shooting Laurence Olivier, not only Sir Lawrence, but Lord Larry, made a lifetime peer by the British government because of his services to acting. You know, one of the great actors of all time is playing Zell, the former Nazi war criminal, come back to New York, shaving his hair to try and not be recognized as the war criminal he is, to find out how much his stash of diamonds is worth after his brother is killed in a car crash. So I had the joy of preceding Lord Larry down 47th Street, the Diamond District, amidst hundreds of Hasidic Jews, 150 of whom were ours, dressed extras. But there were 400 real ones. And we neglected to come up with a scheme to be able to tell ours from the real thing. So we would constantly be ordering around the real one and deferring to our extras, you know. And Conrad Hall had the idea that we should try to disguise the Steadicam so that nobody would look at the camera, right? I, being a collaborative sort of fellow, I said, all right, well, how about if the wardrobe department makes a three-armed sweater, and we'll put one of the arms on the Steadicam arm, and let's hide the camera in a garment bag, floating garment bag, and cut a hole for the lens. And they said, okay.
So basically it's going to look like there's an arm holding the bag.
Well, yeah, it's a pretty, you know, if you think about it, why would anybody look at a 6'6" man backing up, a three-armed man backing up with a floating, whirring garment bag with an Arriflex?
But it's New York City, so they probably will go, get out of my way.
Nobody looked at all. Nobody looked. Except one old lady, and this is probably not true, who came up and listened near the bag, and she said, So why should I be quiet? It's an Aeroflex. It's MOS.
We'll say that's true. That's a good enough story.
I like it. Anyway.
So you're floating down with a 3-arm sweater, and did it work?
Well, no, nobody looked, so that worked fine. But we went back to that street without any of that, and of course, nobody looked. And the joy of Steadicam is they're more likely to look at your face than they are at the lens, you know? So very often we get away with amazing stuff in crowds because why would they look at the lens, you know? They would look at you know?
Well, but did you have the look by
That's
then?
why
Is
you,
that why?
that's why you need to look.
That's why you need to look.
So the other one is a totally disreputable story, but I want to remind you that great cities in the world were infested with dog poop. Long after they got rid of horse manure, when the cars came along, you know, people's dogs did their business and it just stayed there forever. That was part of the urban skill of walking among these things and not stepping on them, you know. And they stayed until either trampled into nothing or it rained upon or whatever. So, and we took that for granted. And it had a big effect on enterprises like movie making because you had to be wary of it, right? And so the largest one that any of us had ever seen, probably a Great Dane or in mortal distress left that behind. And of course, none of us ever thought of removing it. No tricks had.
No.
So there it was at the start mark of one of my shots running after Dustin Hoffman, right? And we all scoped it and, you know, told our friends to avoid it, and, you know, I managed to avoid it. And this shot was pell-mell running down 70-something street, chasing Dustin at absolutely top speed. And we did the first take, and a door in a wall, a fence next to us, just ahead of Dustin, opened up, and an old woman dressed in black, who I suspect was the same woman
Who's there? Yeah. The area technician who lived down the block.
came out in front of Dustin, and he knocked her down. And I jumped over her. My assistant jumped over her. John Schlesinger, the director, stepped on her leg, and there were about 4 more of us that couldn't be stopped, and we all went tearing by and then stopped and looked back, and she was getting up, picking herself up and saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And she went back through the same door and disappeared. Now the producers were thanking their stars, you know, that she was not litigious and wasn't going to sue us for everything we worked. And there was a certain amount of puzzled euphoria when we went back to the start mark. And that's when the most august below the liner of all, John Schlesinger, stepped smack in the middle of it. And he was very grand. He called for a stool, he sat back, he put his foot out. A PA, the lowest of the low, had to remove his shoe and clean it in a bucket, and so on and so on. And then that was that, right? Except about 3 minutes later, I observed one of the makeup people spritzing Dustin because he liked to have a, you know, wet sweat, you know, on his forehead, and she's being spritzed, and he's doing that New York, you know, universal New York thing, you know, sniffing around and looking at his own shoes, you know. And I looked down, and that was the same bucket. Now, you know, you may be in this position someday. You know, we occupy a unique. We're with the unit, but we're also autonomous in some way. You know, as was beautifully put out in that seminar. What do you do? You know, if I was to yell, "Stop! There's dog poop in that water," Dustin would have gone away and had himself boiled and shampooed and re-wardrobed, and we would have been shut down for the day, right? So I did nothing. And he was distracted soon after, and the work continued, but I did edge up to the makeup person, and I said, I would get a different bucket. And she said, why? I said, sniff it. And I can assure you that bucket disappeared for all time. But this is not what you expect, you know. You simply don't.
I didn't know that part of the story. That's new.
I didn't share everything.
And I will say I'm going to go watch Marathon Man, and his performance will not be the same as I remember. I'm going to look for that. That's kind of incredible. Now, is Marathon Man is the show where did you fall or stumble and decided to put the monitor down below versus up high? Is that Marathon Man?
No.
That's the story I always heard. This is tall stories, so we're supposed to lie.
Oh yeah, sure, Dave.
He's like, great, okay, moving on. No, I had always heard that there was some stumbling or something where you were looking up and you decided to put it down low.
No, somebody notoriously took credit for, in fact, several people have taken credit for helping us by saying, oh, that monitor shouldn't be up there. But
yeah.
Fortunately, in my original patent, the drawing shows the monitor down where it should be, obviously down where your eye line is and where you're walking and all that. And when it was made with it up here, it was very discouraging, you know, and I was nervous about that. I didn't ever fall with that setup, but that was the so-called Steadicam 35, and I used it for the tail end of Rocky in the ring, unanodized, as we say, and I used it for the tail end of Marathon Man. Not for Bound for Glory. That was all the original prototype. That
was all the original.
Yeah. We're talking, by the way, 1975. I got to do those 3 films right off the bat in 75, one after the other, going back and forth doing it. It was an astonishing year, you know.
And you know, we all show up on set with our spanky cases and whatever. Do you have it like in a sack in the back of the car?
Cardboard boxes.
Cardboard boxes. So there's a lot of people were really impressed when you showed up on set. I mean, it was
well, you know, there always were rumors. I said to Ellen one time, I had a dream where the grips were like Luddites, you know, hating this new technology and indiscreetly kicking it down the hill, you know, so that it wouldn't take away their livelihood making dolly shots, you know. And I said to Ellen, what do you think the grips might think of this, you know? I can't remember your answer, but I'm sure you were soothing and saying, no, I'm sure they will like it. And of course the grips love it, you know. They're your best friend shooting. They're the ones that save you and fix you and make ramps and, you know, make it all possible, you know.
Next up, we have Indiana Jones.
Oh.
You want me to tell you what you have written down? The end part is my favorite.
Oh, okay. We're talking Temple of Doom, right? Rope bridge, Sri Lanka, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 100% humidity. Rope bridge with steel cables hidden with rope, with boards, with big spaces between them, okay? At 378 feet above the water. This is an artifact of pre-digital, CGI, because nobody today would go to Sri Lanka and build a rope bridge 380 feet above the water and transport a crew there and a British caterer and so on and shoot a movie like this. For better or worse, all of that will be ones and zeros, you know. And whatever degree of ones and zeros weenies is doing the work at that time, that's what it'll be. And they will say, well, let's make it 1,000 feet tall. Okay. And let's make the spaces between the boards this big. Yeah, okay. The trouble with that is you've so lost touch with reality that it becomes a cartoon, you know, am I right? Yeah. Like fight scenes in the early CGI era when Spider-Man would fall faster than gravity. Any kid who's ever thrown a ball will look at that and there's some circuit that says that's not real. You know, now obviously all that is getting better and it's great, but I don't regret, how should we say, growing up in the era when you went out to Sri Lanka and you were on the actual bridge, because there was something, the word is verisimilitude, of real life in that. It is just almost impossible to conjure up with ones and zeros. So here is us, very real life types, at 100 degrees, running on that bridge. And of course it was a perfect stroke for Steadicam to be on that bridge because the bridge is doing this, it's moving in sine waves and so on. And the more of those dressed extras who are on it, the deeper the excursions of the bridge. So I'm running, but my legs are doing this as the bridge is going along. And you always had to have your feet fore and aft, because if you put a foot sideways, literally it would go down between one of the gaps. So you frequently felt your toe just on a board, but your heel was on it. And so you're raising your feet up higher than normal to run. And here is Harrison, who is really game, really a courageous guy. I have to hand it to this guy. He's running along, and he said to Stephen early on, well, what happens if a board breaks? And some of you may have heard these stories in workshops. Has anybody heard this tale? Have heard me say it? Good, okay. Virgins. I love this. Stephen said, don't worry, these are flame-hardened boards. Okay. So we were much comforted by that. We continued to run on them. And a board broke under Harrison Ford. And his leg went down to the crotch, headed for the river. And if another had broken, he would be lost and gone, right? And he was pissed. And he made Stephen come out on the bridge. Stephen hated the bridge. And they had a conversation. And so we were shut down for hours while the biggest grips obtainable jumped on all the boards. And 2 more broke. No. And were replaced with even more flame-hardened boards. And now we resumed running on the bridge, but with not quite the same enthusiasm that we had before. But I have to hand it to Harrison. He just went back and did it, And boy, was Steadicam the right choice. Except that, by the way, how are we doing for time here?
We're good. I'm keeping an eye.
Okay. The problem is that you need an eye line. And the eye line needs to be in this, not straight down the barrel with the camera in the middle of the bridge. The eye line has to be from outside the ropes. And for the reverses, you suddenly are in goofy, or you're in normal and then you're in goofy. For those of you who don't know, goofy foot is with the arm coming from the other direction. And at the time, the only way to do that was to literally take apart the center of the arm and the socket headed into the socket block, and flip the pins and flip the hinge so that it would go the other direction, right? And I did that about 6 times on the bridge with Jeremy G., my assistant, like this, holding these parts.
Why did you come off
Because it's a long, scary way off the damn bridge.
Okay.
And it was hot.
All right.
And I don't know, actually, I didn't think of it, no. And I resolved to make a quick change from goofy to, that's where that came from. I mean, all this stuff that we enjoy now much of it came from some traumatic situation like that, right?
Well, also, now that I think back, if you had to take that off with screws, that also meant that big spring, right, that sort of kept the, was there?
No, that worked, that worked okay.
That worked okay.
Yeah,
Oh, so you didn't
yeah.
have to, but still, that's
But you said that with the look, though. That was good. Anyway, all of these things we do advance, and that stuff, that particularly kind of moved us ahead. That was good.
Now that you've
What
said it,
else is
I just
on
want to
it?
say that
Anything
for
else?
Indiana Jones, you had rope bridge, which we talked about, regular goofy switch, which we talked about, broken board, which we talked about, and then in parentheses, never again.
Yeah, never again is because of the digital thing. No company will spend that money.
I thought you meant I'm never doing this
No,
again.
no,
Is that-
I'd cheerfully go back to the rope bridge. No, it's sad, I think, because you will very likely not shoot a theater full of tuxedoed people again. Or if you do, it's like the biggest budget thing in your history, It's too easy for the 1s and 0 guys to go, what do you want, white tie or black tie? White tie, look, black tie, white, black, white, black. Oh, I think I'll take black tie. You sure? White, black? Yeah, black tie, okay. That's the era we're in, and since Brother Jobs did his work with the iPhone in 2007. Our world has changed, completely changed. Where a subway used to be full of people reading newspapers, it's full of people looking at their phones. I mean, this is a new world. It's good. I embrace it. I love it. But we have to make something great of it. You know?
But that said, I've been doing this not as long as you have, but I've been doing this for a while. A lot of people in this
How many
room-
years, Dave?
34 years.
Yeah.
It hurts right here. There have been all these times where it's been like, that's it, we're done. This is taken
no.
over. That's it, we're done.
You know-
and yet, not only are we still doing it, are we still doing Steadicam? People still want Steadicam, but it still basically works the way that you created it.
Yeah.
I mean, some anodizing and some this and some that, and now the
Yeah,
bolt,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But it's
I love
basically
that.
the same.
I saw a phrase that I put aside for the book, and the phrase is, stability is geometry, operating is art. There's a big difference between, what a gimbal does, which is stupidly stable, notwithstanding, having to not show your footsteps and blah, 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 blah. But this thing is an instrument. Steadicam is still an instrument. It still can be played, can play visual music. And the quality of the art that goes into that is still apparent. And that gives me hope that this machine will be around for a while still. When the gimbals came out, everybody said, oh, as you say, well, pack it in.
Yeah.
I could always flip burgers.
I've sold it and bought it back 3 times now. I keep on giving up and it comes back. But it makes me think of the shot that, up the stairs that you were talking about, how it vexes you. And we all have that shot that we see that everybody loves, and then you're like, but it's horrible. There's this, but I've never even noticed that before, because the
I'm
thing
sorry
is,
I mentioned it.
you destroyed it for me. No, but the thing is, because the storytelling in that shot is how how joyous it is for him that he's made it up those stairs, and so it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, it is the story, and what our particular art on this instrument is in service of story, in a way that I don't think anything else is quite. And not to mention, it's a great job still. It's arty, it's athletic. You get to rent your kit. We get worried about the producers, and they try to not spend money on us or anything else for that matter.
They don't do that anymore. It's changed.
But
Just throw money at us now.
what we do is still valuable. Okay, what's next?
Next up is
Are we
a movie.
okay with this format, by the way? You guys are good? Okay. I'm bringing you tales from 40, 50 years ago, It's not bad to think about where this came from. There's some real continuity here,
There's a movie called The Shining. Do you know that movie?
Do you have IMDb?
Yeah. Look it up. Want to see if you worked on it?
Yeah, that was a trip. That was a year in Boreham Wood in England. And I showed up, and the first thing that I saw was a stripped-down 2CV deux chevaux, as they say, Citroën. And they had taken everything off of it except, great, thank you. Oh, is that for me or you?
That's for me.
Oh, can I have one too?
Get out of here.
They had taken everything off of it but the steering wheel and a wooden platform and the wonderful Citroën suspension. Why? Because Stanley built that giant set, and you cannot make an acres of floor that is dolly smooth. You can very carefully make a small distance, or you can lay plywood, but you cannot make miles of it. And so everything he tried was chattering and moving and so on. And before I appeared, well before, because Stanley saw the Steadicam coming, as you saw from that telex, and knew that this might be the solution. But they tried pushing that deux chevaux down those corridors with the camera on baby legs, looking out the back of it, and report that it was still wallowing around to an unusable extent. And part of the joy of the Steadicam on that show is it becomes something else. It becomes like the hotel's eye view. It's not quite a POV. It's still an objective story shot, but there's a quality that what's looking is something else, which is, I think, part of the appeal of that.
It's
film,
amazing. But because you mentioned it while you drink, I'll ask you this question. What was it like to get that telex from Stanley
Oh my
Kubrick?
God, it was amazing.
I mean, that must be incredible.
I was a fan of Kubrick, so that blew the top of my head off. The telex went on and on, congratulations, blah, blah, blah. You can count on me as a customer. Should revolutionize the way films are shot. I couldn't get my head in any of my hats after that. I mean,
and then when you, how many movies have you done by then?
7 or 8.
At that point, are you feeling like I know what I'm doing? I mean, clearly you know what you're doing more than anyone else. But
I'll be honest with you, I've never had a feeling that I know what I'm doing. I'm serious. I think that's a dangerous feeling.
I think there are a lot of us in the room who feel the exact same way all the time.
I have a feeling that others don't know what they're doing.
Actually, it's not a feeling.
I've had that
The sad
periodically.
thing is those people think they know what they're doing.
Yeah,
That's the big problem.
that's a dangerous delusion, and there are some of them very visibly in the public right now that think they know what they're doing. So we're all in more or less degree of trouble. But I am optimistic about most things. And as of starting The Shining, I was just very wide-eyed. The first shot that I did was that in the lobby, taking Jack into the desk and following me into the office and so on. 40 takes, and it was 100 degrees in there because Stanley had insisted the air conditioning be hidden in the pillars for that set, and it was inadequate because once they turned on in that set, 700,000 watts of PAR lights behind the Marlocks, to make daylight out those windows. It was astonishingly hot. But I learned in that day, I learned that, first of all, I better gird myself for a bunch of takes, because the first take when I landed in the office and I was kind of all in a distorted position, I wasn't sure when Jack was going to stop, and I'm waiting for cut. Stanley? What? I can assure you that the next 39 takes, I glided into that office, stopped in a perfect position with the look on my face.
That's fantastic.
You want to hear, though, the main event that got me through that show was the invention of wireless video assist. I showed up with a version that was terrible that I had made in a panic in the US, and it didn't work, and Stanley gave it the elbow day one, and I was signed up for dragging coaxes through all those sets because he wanted a good picture, right? And I found a young British man, an engineer, who was just selling a UHF transmitter on channel 14 that worked on the mains, on the plug that plugged in. And I got a hold of this guy in the first week, and I said, could that be powered by 12 volts? Could you make a small version in 12 volts? And he said, yeah. He said, it actually runs on 12 volts. I have, he reduced it. So he made me a thing in a box like this on channel 14 UHF, which is just below the real channels. Totally illegal in the UK. And it worked. And Video Dan, our video assist guy, learned to place antennas here and there and switch between them so that Stanley could pretty much see what was happening. And by the time we got in the maze, of course, that was absolutely essential. You could not be dragging a wire, right? But at some point, Stanley said, can anybody else see this? Because he obviously did not want the world looking at it. And Boreham Wood, the studio lot, was ridiculously small. Here, just behind a little berm are suburban houses with Yagi antennas aimed right at us over the studio toward London, I said, no, Stanley. See the wire screen on the studio? That's a Faraday cage. That stops anything from getting out. And then I took my little portable out, and Dougie Milsom and I walked around, and God help me, there would be a perfect picture here and then not here. And right over here, suddenly, boom, clearly I could see it, Well, we would have gotten away with this except that Dougie and I foolishly started imitating Monty Python women as if we were in the suburb looking at Stanley's thing. Woo, poor Mr. Brown! It's a 24 Distagon. You can see it. This vignetting round the edges. Woo! And he fucking overheard us. So he insisted, and he had a Bronx accent, and he insisted, Garrett, I want you to walk me around with that monitor. Let's make sure nobody can see this. I said, absolutely, Stanley. And I went to all the places I knew there was no picture. I said, all right. Actually, what would have prevented the Borehamwood women from looking at it would have been the incredible boredom of 140 takes. Oh, I'm not watching these.
Oh, that's fantastic. You also have salt and fire risk written down.
How are we for time? We're good?
You're good.
How are we actually for time? Good. The snow was salt, dairy salt, 900 tons of it. And all the clinging snow was styrofoam. When it rained, the top of the dairy salt turned blue, so Stanley would have more truckloads come in, so it would get thicker and deeper, right? Salt will rot through your leather boots, I discovered, in about 2 weeks. So we all went through tons of boots. In the maze, the worst part of it was in the maze, which was rebuilt inside stage 3, the same old ultra-dry pine needles that had been in the exterior stage, the exterior lot, the old MGM lot. There's an outdoor maze shots, and then it becomes winter, right? They were pine boughs stapled to plywood. That's how that was made. It was taken down, was put back up in stage 3. And there was a lot of it. It was an absolute actual maze. We constantly got lost. But the worst of it was, these are 1,000-watt downlights, agricultural, architectural lighting, this far from styrofoam, snow, and extremely hot on these pine needles, ultra dried out pine needles. Let's put a huge heat source over kindling. So we were constantly fearful that if it caught fire, we wouldn't be able to find our way out. And it's no good going, Stanley! If it's on fire. And we were always lost. They would send in ADs with maps, and we would yell, and they would find us, because the kid just ran anywhere, obviously. And we followed, and then finally it all ran down, and we had to be led back out of the maze, right? Jesus. And the worst of it is, and here I'm serious, was movie smoke in that era was made by oil, superheated, turned into invisibly thin droplets of oil. That was movie smoke. It was a vapor made by vaporizing oil. And we breathed that stuff for 3 months in that set. And there's part of me that wonders whether that will ever catch up.
It does interesting things to you, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that is obviously no longer legal, but between the risk of fire and the oil smoke, that was the roughest set that I've ever worked on. But at the same time, kinetically, really gratifying, because to cut those corners with a 9.8 millimeter lens, with a level on the camera to keep the lens, so that you have another thing to look out to make sure you're level fore and aft, because the instant that rig got off level, it would keystone like crazy. But that lens was gorgeous if you kept it level. And we would be piling through that set, cutting corners like racing turns, which of course you couldn't have done any other way,
To this day, that work, it's amazing work, and it holds up. You're not going to tell us what your drop time is, are you?
Eventually.
Okay. Everybody stay tuned for later. Junior?
Now let's go to. Anybody have any questions?
We get questions here.
How many have we got?
Any questions?
Time this out.
All right. Let's see. What was the most
How
gratifying?
many questions total?
We got 4 or 5. And people want to, the things are there if you want to put a question in here.
Last call for questions.
Thank
Yeah,
you
I'll
very
tell
much, Charles Pappert. The A operator on Bound for Glory was Don Thorin. I could not
Don
think of his
Thorne,
name.
thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
Oh, damn it, Don. I'm so sorry.
So what was it? Oh, was most Javier Costas asked, what was the most gratifying job that you ever did?
I had the great joy of shooting an opera in Paris in 2000, La Traviata, shot by Vittorio Storaro, film style, in 4 locations. Bicycled to work every day, rehearsed for months, and shot it live, all on one day, 4 locations. I shot the last act, one uncut 23-minute shot. I'd never done live before. I pulled my own zooms, and I ran the trim, the motorized trim on that generation of rig. You know, for example, Vittorio insisted on a Dutch angle at one point, which I still am not sure made sense, but in any event, a run on the button for the trim, the camera lays itself over, absolutely stable, run the button back and it tilts itself back up. Exactly, you know, really gratifying. And at the end of that long day, and we did it flawlessly, 4 Steadicams, 2 cranes, 3 dollies, huge crew, Zubin Mehta conducting, monitors hidden on the set so that the artists could see Zubin conducting, Zubin watching us across town, you know, conducting to the scene. And it was analog in PAL, which could not be done today with all the latency that everybody struggles with. You could never do that show, you know, across town and back digitally, you know. It was analog, you know, speed of light, back and forth. And people crawling out under the lens to open, hide a monitor, if we were going to look that way, crawling out under the lens to move a glass door to another pencil mark so that I wouldn't see Valentin Monge, the great French operator who was the second Steadicam, and then crawling out and moving the door so he wouldn't see me, you know. Absolutely incredible. And one thing sticks with me from that show, one of the most wonderful things I ever saw. Vittorio insisted on on a rehearsal with the stand-ins before we did the final show. After the dress rehearsal, the night before the final, he insisted on a go with the stand-ins. So he wanted to tune up the lighting. And we all said, oh God, Vittorio, don't do that, because they don't go the same places as the artists, you know, it's different. We're going to be deprogrammed by it. He said, I'm sorry, we have to do it. I almost did Stallone, and you know.
You didn't go there.
And apparently one of the stand-ins stepped on a barn door from one of his key lights to one of the absolute most important moments in the show when Violetta turns away from a fireplace and she's singing almost her last in this opera, and this was her key light, right? And I get to that point after, you know, 50, 60 different moves within this set. It's probably at minute number 18, and I get to this part of the show, and she's in the dark, turned to camera and in the dark. And I'm going, shit, you know, there's nothing I can do about this. You know, I couldn't change the iris, there's nothing I can do. And I see some motion out in my corner of my eye. And here is Vittorio with his little white scarf and his bald head, crawling Marine style along under the floor with a glove, an insulated glove. And he looks up at me and he goes like this. And he waits until the important part of her aria, and he opens the door as she sings the most important part of it. And Christ, tears sprang from my eyes. It was the greatest thing. And I had to pan in his direction in about 3 seconds, and he gave me a grin, and he because the doors to the control room were just cut into the apartment and were concealed with wallpaper. And by the time I panned over, the door was closed, he was gone. We ended that show with all of us in tears, with sweat running down our faces, with the crew gathered on the quay down below that had been watching this, because the sense of triumph grew with the fact that we're getting to the end and there's no error, And at the end of it, she sings, she dies in Alfredo's arms against a window through which you could see Notre Dame that Vittorio lit up. And it was exactly midnight at the end of it, and everybody is in tears, and then it's cut, and we realize it's over, and there's this look of disbelief on the faces of these people, and we're hugging each other, and oh my God, it was great. I've had great, wonderful moments shooting, but I again could wish you a show like that, and it was amazing, absolutely amazing. It is still, I think, available on Blu-ray.
It is actually. I was looking for it.
It's a real trip, that show.
Jose Figueroa says, during the prototyping phase, what was or was there an aha moment when you suddenly sort of went, oh, this is how it works?
It was very incremental. We snuck up on it with. The worst thing was this crane-like thing. I was convinced that it had to go to floor to ceiling. So one of the prototypes was a big, long crane, handheld, but that meant the camera's out in front of it, and it had to be panned and tilted with a web of Berg belts, and handles. So, and it had to be panned via a worm gear. I won't get too technical here, but it turns out there's numerous grades of worm gear, and if you don't get a high grade one, it chatters in pan. And all of these revelations were really discouraging, and my machinist said, we're going to have to try a grade 14 worm gear. I thought, oh my fuck. Grade 14 worm gear in 1974, that setup was $5,000 with the stuff. That's like NASA quality drive a telescope gear. And this thing got more and more absurd, and heavier and heavier. And I had to have a old Leopard with an 8-foot bungee cord running through pulleys to hang onto the camera so that the whole bungee cord would expand and contract through the pulleys to beat Hooke's law, which states that a short spring is a hard ride. A long spring is a soft ride. And that thing just got so ridiculous. Well, an apocryphal story, but I stuck myself in a motel for a week to try and figure it out. And at the end of the week, had a sketch of the way it is now. I can't say it was a eureka or the moment that you're fishing for, but it was a moment, well, this is the best it's going to get. I was disappointed that it only went from the waist to over the head. I wanted floor to ceiling, etc. But I had no idea how sweet it would be to be able to one-to-one just pan it, move it, tilt it, place it, And it was light enough to take a 35 camera. My crane would never have done so.
Yeah.
And I found a machinist, a wonderful guy, who built this prototype. And Ellen and I went out to see how it was, and I put it on, and it was horrible. I could barely get it across the chest. I couldn't reach it, and I realized that it isn't just an arm. When we reach, there's 6 or 8 inches of shoulder travel involved. And I asked this man, Jack Hauser, to make me one more link, spring-loaded back, that would let the arm go out like that. And went home kind of in a stew of unhappiness, and came back 4 days later, put this thing on, and it was like, Jesus, this could be it. And we went running around in his little neighborhood of World War II houses, and then sayonara Jack drove away with it, and following that, we made the demo that is called the 30 Impossible Shots demo, which can still be seen on the internet. Mm-hmm. And it was 30 shots that could not have been done any other way. And Ellen went back to the Art Museum steps and ran down and ran back up. And then we took that demo to Hollywood, and that was it.
Amazing. Javier Acosta asks, how long did you operate Steadicam and when did you actually hang up the rig?
Well, I started on features in '75, shot the last Steadicam shot in, I can't remember, it was '04 or '08. My last show.
What was it? What was it?
Birth.
Birth. Oh, okay.
Who's the fastest in the room on IMDb? Birth, Kidman, Nicole Kidman.
Yeah, I just actually saw you did the opening shot.
Yeah,
right?
it's a
Because
very
I
cool
just
shot.
saw that on the rebuild of the Steady shots, which will be coming soon. Because I was watching it the other day, and I didn't. So that was your last.
That's
that
a
was your
story,
last one.
actually. That's not a bad story. Jonathan Glazer wanted a shot flying over the trees in Central Park and looking at a lone runner running in the snow.
It's a cool shot.
And I offered him this thing that I had done called the Superfly Cam, point-to-point camera. You know, you would need a crane. You'd need a crane. Getting the wire over these precious trees from one end to the other 1,000 feet would be difficult. And the Park Service told us that if you break one branch, you're kicked out. You know, and this just got harder and harder. And I started to think, this is going away. It's not going to happen. The useful outcome of this in terms of strategy is I thought, okay, I've got to think of a Steadicam shot that can do this. And I had done a shot for the director of Prince of the City and Death Trap and wonderful guy,
I can't think right now.
from the top of a truck.
Someone's looking it up.
And I thought, let me get the tallest truck that we can get that, you know, I can stand up there and still fit through those tunnels. And I'll stand up on this truck, you know, with a chained down, you know, Garfield mount, and shoot wide angle down at this guy, just avoiding the body of the truck, and we'll be closer to him. And I sold it to Glazer on the basis of we can carry this shot right through the tunnels, you know? And
Oh, Cindy Lumet.
Sidney Lumet, just great, very good. And it worked, you know. It was a really good shot, and that they let some feral dogs loose that ran across it at one point. It was good, seriously. That was it. That was my swan song with the rig.
It's funny because I was watching that shot and I'm thinking, I know he's tall, but I don't think he's this tall. And I was wondering how you did
Well,
it.
when you think about it, here's a 12-foot, you know, truck at least, and you know, 7 feet my lens, and I had a guy stationed behind me on the top of the truck to tap me if it had to get lower to clear the
branches.
sighting ahead at the tunnel, which I couldn't do. And you know, and at one point he pulled my head down, you know. And the other thing was I had a spinning disc, rain disc on the camera because snow was predicted, and we got big snowflakes. I'm not sure that was in the shot they used for the show, but in one of the takes we were flying through the snow. It was fantastic.
The one that's on there is poor quality. We have to update it, so maybe on the updated. Question from Liv Ferris. Advice for people who are just starting out in Steadicam.
Everybody has to find their own way. I think there is no formula. This is a big worldwide phenomenon. You know, you have to think of it as something desirable. It's desirable to a student making a film. It's desirable to, you know, low budget productions. It's, you know, the high end jobs are pretty well sucked up by some of the existing high end people. But boy, is there room at the bottom. You know, you have to think of it that way, is to find your way into this profession. Because the great thing about it is you do good work at any level and it will get noticed, you know, one way or another, you know. Anybody have any other advice for newbies with it? This is an important topic. Anyone?
Stretch.
Yeah, stretch for longevity. I'll throw one out there is, and I mean, this may be a cop-out, but be a decent person and be a good person, because a lot of times you come on set and you're the Steadicam operator. It's like, oh, it's a Steadicam. You're just another crew member who's doing a job. You're better than everybody else. We all know that, but just don't let people know that, right?
Yeah, that's good. I mean,
You might have coined this phrase, but best thing you can say is have a person that has the strength of a gorilla and the grace of a ballerina.
There you go.
Strength of a gorilla and the grace of a ballerina. I actually said it the opposite.
That may explain a lot. You could have had a career, but you know, since we put it out to the room, and I think that this is something worth talking about, you invented the gizmo, which we all thank you for. But I think you and Jerry and a bunch of other people also invented this concept, right? Of Steadicam operators, and it's one of the few things.
And the late lamented Teddy Churchill.
And Ted Churchill
Invented the profession of Steadicam operator.
Yeah, and the operator himself on some level. But I think there's something to that. I'm just wondering if you can speak about that, because I know, you know, I'm up for a job, and you're up for a job, and you're up for a job, and we all want the job. But the second one of us gets the job, if the gear goes down or whatever, 2 a.m., we're there. Doesn't make a difference. We support each other. And I don't think there's anything else like that I've seen.
That is, as Chris has eloquently put it, is one of the, you know, the secret sauces of Steadicam, is that the operators look out for each other. And obviously, that was a choice. We could have made of operators every little walled garden, you know, hiding your own stuff and fighting like mad for jobs and downplaying everybody else. And I think it's pretty clear that we made the right choice, you know, that this is the plan that works. And early on, the first few people that I taught in the townhouse before we did the 1980 workshop included Larry McConkey and Kyle Rudolph and one other. And they would do this shot that I devised that went up 6 levels, you know, and went through doors and so on. And Ellen made them sign the dings that they made on the doors with their arms, you know. And they all said, don't teach anybody else this. This is great, you know, don't show this to everybody. And I think that one of the best choices that I made was to reject that idea. It was clear to me that if, let's say, you're the only violin player on earth, you would be in a circus, you know. But if you're a good violin player among 100,000 violin players, that's where you get the, you know, the long limousine and the C-note per diems and the half pound of cocaine or whatever he said in that shot. In other words, the profession helps you. The breadth of the profession helps each operator, because each one is out there proselytizing and selling Steadicam. In the early days, I thought the phone would ring off the hook for me every day, you know, when I had the only one on earth. I've been the only Steadicam operator on earth. And it wasn't that satisfying, because the phone did not ring all the time. It was the bold, the Haskells and the Conrads and the John Avildssons that stepped right out and went for it, you know. The average mortals kind of sit back and see how it goes before they commit. So the size of our profession is one of our great assets, you know. I think, are we close?
We could go on for a while,
go
but
ahead.
we're not going to go.
We have
well,
10 minutes left.
Doc Carmen wants to know who invented the Steadicam operator headband.
Doc, you would have. I thought you did.
I'm going to go with either. It's got to be Ted Churchill or Guy
Then
B.
you did.
Right? Bob Euland. Bob Euland?
Bob Euland.
Oh, Bob Euland.
That's it.
That's right. No, Guy B invented rock and roll pants. Yeah.
Yeah, Bob was great.
Every ad in American Cinematographer always had the.
That's right. Yeah.
I had a shot to do for Eddie Olmos was directing a Chicago, Miami Vice episode, and it was shot in the house owned by the brother of the guy that made Vizcaya, one of those great Spanish houses, you know. This one had been closed since the hurricane of 1926, and Eddie somehow persuaded them to open it up for us to shoot in this house, right? And he wanted to make a shot in the basement, right? Well, I got down to the basement. It was 5 feet 7 inches tall, you know? And I thought, shit, you know, Christ, how am I going to do this, you know? And I was aware that Bob Euland lived in Miami. So I called Bob up and I said, Bob, are you available? Get over here. And I had the great joy of being on the porch with my little video monitor watching Bob do my shot in the basement, where it was so low that even Eddie Olmos had to, walk like that.
That's great. Tyler Rushlow asks, when you began to work more and more, did you ever get the sense at the time that you were actually changing filmmaking and filmmakers forever, which I'm guessing maybe you won't agree with, but I'm going to say you did with the Steadicam. Was there ever a moment where you're like, we're really changing the way that films are being made?
I wouldn't have put it that way to myself, I knew that this was a magic carpet and it could do stuff that was really fun. And the reason is dollies obviously are a mechanistic, linear way of moving a lens. You can exert yourself all you will. They're a linear way of moving a lens, And the Steadicam is something absolutely other than that. It has the glorious impromptu ability to follow, to be ambulated by a human being, and the reach of your arms added into that, and our ability to therefore make moves that are like French curves that would have driven a dolly grip nuts, I knew that was, really valuable, but I don't think we talked about revolutionizing the business. We just wanted a niche, we just wanted to do great shots,
Can you remember showing up with a filmmaker who said, I wanted to do this, and it was something that you had never realized it could do or thought of, and it elevated it?
I'm sure.
Was that
I'm
Kubrick
sure
on
I have.
Shining?
It doesn't come to mind,
Yeah.
but I'm sure I have. I certainly didn't think of everything
Yeah.
that I was asked, You all can, there are a great many dear friends of mine in this room. And I regard it as an amazing privilege to, first of all, still be around and to be able to sit in front of you and tell stories. But we're all engaged in this same lovely thing, this lovely quest for visual music. Very different than what a dumb stabilizer, let's say, might do. I was staring at a line yesterday. The line is, stability is geometry. Operating is art. We've said this, I think that's true, We are, that's what distinguishes this from a black box stabilizer. Yeah. We heard rumors early on that we would be obsoleted by some French invention.
Early on, in like when you first came out?
Yeah. And we were trying to figure out what it was. It was the Luma crane that somebody was thinking of. And that led to my making the mistake that I most regret, actually, in my whole career. I was on the set of 1941 watching Steven Spielberg and playing with his Luma, which he did obsessively on that film. And I don't know, I misjudged the guy. I didn't, you better turn that off, Dave. No, turn it back on for this next line. And I was so wrong. He's fabulous. He's the best director in history.
We'll cut that together.
For whatever reason, I don't know. I wasn't enthralled, let's put it that way. And didn't I get a call about a month later or two or whatever? They wanted me to go on his next film in the desert for 3 months or something like that. It was Indiana Jones it was
The first one?
Yeah, what was the first one?
Just Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I don't know, I didn't feel like it at the moment. I had other stuff going on, and I turned him down, right? And many months later, I'm sitting in the theater with my young son and just beating myself over the head because it was terrific. The film was great. I gave him another operator. I gave him an English operator who wasn't that skillful. And I could see Steven trying it a couple of times, and then it never appeared again. And I know if I'd been on that film, it would have been a mainstay for him, and it would have been really good, And it was a while until I got to work for him. It was until Twilight Zone that I finally got to work for him. But if I could reverse time, I'd flip that one thing.
That's the one that got away.
Yeah, that one got away, and that would have been great. And when I'm watching this film, I'm going, damn it, because every possible opportunity was there. But you know, you're not going to get it all right. You know, none of us are going to make perfect choices.
I'm going to hit you with one more from here and then one of my own. With the advent of the Vault 3 now, or Vault 2, or whatever we're calling it, have we reached a plateau of Steadicam innovation, or have you already imagined a more advanced Steadicam we've yet to see?
Oh yes,
That's from Nicholas Kramer.
Tiffen Collings and I are still, including the great Steve Wagner, who is very largely responsible for the Vault. We have a few more tricks up our sleeve, so stand by.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. I love the Vault. I wish I had had one on every shot that I've done. The great thing about it is you can use it or not use it. You know, keeping level is just a purely housekeeping chore, an annoying, irritating housekeeping chore. And it takes up some sizable part of your brain. Depending on your brain, it took up about 60% of mine. You know, you obsessively looking, you know, the navigating and the acting, the level, the navigating, the level, the navigating. So it's nice to not have that, and it's nice to be able to operate in neutral balance. Those two things are really valuable. I don't miss the goddamn pendulum, you know. Yeah. And it's not, you know, it's not a crutch. It's the same as anti-lock brakes for a car, you know, or something like that. It's just, it allows you to be bolder, and that I love. Go ahead.
My question, which maybe what we'll end with is, you know, you've done a couple of things in your lifetime. What's next?
Hoy. Well, I semi-retired from my last inventing gig, which was a wheelchair walker combination.
Tell me about the zine.
It uses a lot of Steadicam technology, as a matter of fact, to lift people.
If you haven't seen this, go to gozeen.com, G-O-Z-E-E-N.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it's very cool.
Gozeen.com. It is cool. But I was not really a native CEO type, and I was running this thing for a while, and now there's professional folks at the helm, which is great. So I'm able to back away from that and get back to something I started in 2000 when Cinema Products went under and Skycam went bankrupt, both at once. And I thought, well, I better write a book, you know. And that book advanced to about 50% done and sat there, and I now have the great joy of getting back to that, and up come these stories, some of which you've heard today will be in this book. I think I'm about 70%, 80% done. Hope to have it done this year. And that would be really good. And if the documentary, if Andy's show goes, that would be very synergistic, be great. So I am 82, and I'm having a great time, you know. At this age, is a kind of a sleigh ride between hazards, you know, and the trick is to not do anything stupid and keep yourself alive and to get stuff done. I still love it, you know. So, and here I am, you know, and hope to remain for a bit. And thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We'll be back soon with another great episode. Don't forget to check us out on theop.io for all sorts of information on operating and storytelling. So thanks for listening and have a great day.